I think with the arrow keys.
Thank you. No? There we go. Following the horrific events which occurred on October 7th, 2023, Jews globally were left grief-stricken, terrified by their loved ones, for the future of the Jewish community, as well as the future of Israel. Many Jews in the United States saw this as an opportunity to reaffirm their Jewishness and unite the community against the rising tide of anti-Semitism. However, rather than unify, the Jewish community of the University of Denver fractured, seemingly beyond repair. Almost immediately following October 7th, 2023, the rhetoric which students used to describe their identity changed. The most important changes I noticed were in relation to racial identity, political identity in regards to Israel, and connection to the Holocaust. My paper hopes to understand how the American Jewish identity is changing, what factors are causing the change, and what it will mean for the future of American Jewish community, as well as American politics moving forward, if the Jewish identity is to remain in the political spotlight. My paper utilizes ethnographic data from interviews and surveys done on campus to understand why October 7th and the subsequent conflict over the Israel-Palestine conflict led to distress, division, and fear among DU's Jewish community. This paper utilizes Dov Waxman's scholarship on Jewish political relationship to Israel to better understand how Israel is both a contemporary state as well as a religious holy land factored into Jewish identity formation. I also place this fracture in the context of American racial politics, something which Waxman does not explore in his work. When I initially began this project, I wanted to determine if there was a growing sense of Jewish nationalism. This theory stems from discussions online as well as on campus, which created clear-cut boundaries of who was and was not Jewish. According to several students, to be Jewish, one has to be ethnically Jewish, have some connection to the Holocaust, and support the state of Israel. In order to test my theory, I resolved to survey and interview as many Jews as Jewish students on campus as possible to gauge whether they felt they belonged in the Jewish community and if social media messaging impacted their answer. To do this, I plan to use the Hillel emailing list to email my survey. In my first 3 years of undergrad, the University of Denver Hillel regularly had a minimum of 20 students per Shabbat and over 150 for holidays such as Rosh Hashanah, Purim, and Passover Seder. However, upon inquiry, I was informed by the director that there was no email anymore, and that it would be better for me to attend in person. When I arrived, Hillel was a ghost town. Aside from myself, there were 3 students. Now, while Hillel is the most well-known Jewish campus organization, boasting that it is, quote, the largest Jewish campus organization in the world, quote, it is not the only locus for Jewish community at the University of Denver. The university, which I will add, is roughly a quarter Jewish. At the time of my study, the university was home to a Hillel, a Chabad, and a chapter of Zeta Beta Tau, the first Jewish fraternity in the United States. However, the majority of Jewish students who participated in Jewish life on campus participated in Hillel as the organization had a larger active presence and offered a less orthodox form of Judaism than Chabad. The fraternity did not offer services or a tangible Jewish affiliation aside from birthright trips. After initial panic, I made the decision to incorporate the vacating of Hillel into my research analysis. The questions I chose were open-ended as I wanted students to be able to explain to me their identity and experiences without forcing a label on them which may not fit. My goal was to assess participants' understanding of what Judaism was, how they understood their racial identity, what core experiences influenced these identities, and whether they felt as though they belonged in the Jewish community. I also asked for their self-described political identity and a relationship or philosophy towards Israel and national identity. In total, I had 60 participants, which makes up an estimated 7.5% of the University of Denver's Jewish population. The lack of centralized Jewish space on campus contributed to the challenge in finding participants. What I found was that, when asked about personal identity, students placed themselves among broader understandings of race, religion, and ethnicity. However, when asked about belonging, most students interpreted my question as referring only to the University of Denver, or referenced experiences at the university which altered their sense of belonging. Having been at the university as a student prior to undertaking the project, I knew of several major incidents which had transpired in the Jewish community which may impact their identity. Number 1, Professor Nader Hashemi of Middle East Studies was fired in 2022 for his statements on Israel. In 2023, multiple students had their mezuzot stolen from their door frames, and one student had pork products glued to his door. And in 2024, the university became home to a Palestine Solidarity encampment, which lasted for 3 weeks between April and May. For context, I proposed my research project to the department spring of 2024 and began research in fall of 2024. When I began crafting my research project, I did not anticipate the existence of a Palestine encampment, nor the subsequent impact it would have on the university's Jewish community. Aside from the Palestine encampment, these events were not named as student responses. Instead, students focused on interactions between each other and other Jewish students, as well as organizations such as Hillel and Chabad. To understand student responses, I organized my questions into 6 categories: Jewish identity, racial identity, attitude towards Israel, significant events which impacted identity, social media use, as well as whether students felt they were accepted in the Jewish community and why. In the first category, 41% participants define Judaism as a culture, ethnicity, or lifestyle. 33 is just a religion comparable to Christianity. The remaining 26 define Judaism as a nation, tribe, or people. However, when asked about their experience of Jewish identity, 1/3 of students changed their responses, and now 51% stated that they experienced Jewishness as a culture, ethnicity, or lifestyle. In terms of race, 54% of participants stated that their Jewish identity separated them from traditional whiteness in America. 24% viewed their Jewishness as part of their white identity. 12% identified as students of color, and the remaining 10% stated that they were white passing for reasons other than their Jewish identity. These students were notably Native American, Latino, or Middle Eastern. Attitude towards Israel were a mixed bag, with 30% stating that Israel is a Jewish homeland, 25% stating that Israel is not safe to visit, another 25% stating that America is their true home and they have no connection to Israel, and 19% stating that Israel is necessary for Jewish safety. I will note that while it is not reflected in this graph, most students held a mix of these views. However, the majority of participants stated that they would not move to Israel despite half holding positive views of the state. The two most important events to inform Jewish identity for students was the Holocaust and October 7th. Social media, the most used social media platform by my participants was Instagram, and the top 3 most followed accounts related to Jewish identity were Jewish on Campus, which is a student-led organization founded in 2020 dedicated to reporting on Jewish life on college campuses, Stand With Us, an international nonpartisan organization dedicated to educating folks about Israel and raising awareness about anti-Semitism, and Jewish Voice for Peace, an anti-Zionist Jewish activist group founded in 1996 by college students in California. However, those students did not follow these accounts. There were more accounts that they were aware of, such as Jubalong, the organization for the pink billboards, and I shit you not, they only pay to make these billboards, and the Anti-Defamation League, or the ADL. According to my survey data, only 1/3 of my participants felt as though they belonged in the Jewish community on campus. Of the remaining 2/3 of respondents, half stated that they felt they did not belong, but they could curate a community on campus where they did, while the rest stated they did not belong, period. Of the students who felt they did not belong, 45% stated it was due to different opinions on Palestine. 22% indicated a difference in practice compared to what was offered by Hillel and Chabad. 13% stated racism, another 13% stated anti-LGBTQ sentiment, and the remaining cited instances of abuse in the community which were ignored or dismissed. Across political groups, all right-wing identifying students, 50% of self-identified centrists, and 1/3 of left-leaning students felt a complete sense of belonging. 7 students, all left-leaning, stated they did not feel that they belonged, and the rest indicated that they did not belong and could curate the community to create belonging. This is significant as according to the Pew Research Center, the majority of American Jews identify themselves as left-leaning. And in the 2020 federal election, the vast majority voted Democrat. While this context accounts for why the majority of my participants identified as left-leaning, it did not account for why most did not feel as welcome as right-wing students. However, American political allegiance was not the most divisive issue according to students. Almost half of the students who indicated that they did not belong stated it was over different opinions on Palestine. This figure is not insignificant. In his book, Trouble in the Tribe, Doug Waxman details how it is common for synagogues and Jewish community centers to avoid discussion of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict for fear of division. That is not disrespectful. While there is an awareness that not everyone holds the same opinion on the actions of the Israeli state, Jewish community is more important. However, Waxman also hypothesizes that this facade of unity has allowed us as Jews to falsely remember a Jewish community united around Israel which never truly existed. Waxman is keen to point out that the majority of American Jews did not give the Jewish state much thought until the 1960s, where its military strength in the Six-Day War made it very popular. That being said, that unified popularity did not last long as public opinion of the state was divided following Israel's invasion of Lebanon in 1978. This complex relationship is often overlooked by mainstream media for both Jews and Gentiles alike, both of which are largely supportive of Israel as it is viewed as a democratic state with values in line with America's own. For this reason, Waxman suggests that American Jews support Israel from synthesizing their Americanness and their Jewishness, something which historian Jonathan Sarna has showcased in his work, Jews in America struggled to do for some time. For this reason, support for Israel has become synonymous with Jewish identity, as most Jews in America do not go to synagogue or keep kosher anymore. These students felt that identification with the state of Israel was a requirement to be in the Jewish community, and from what I have seen, this is not without reason. Hillel International has a direct relationship with the Jewish state, partnering with Taglit Birthright to send students to Israel on a 10-day tour. Hillel International, despite being founded in 1923 and thus older than the Jewish state itself, also holds the organizational motto, "Wherever we stand with Israel." researches in Judaic studies also presupposes a relationship with Israel as a benchmark for Jewish identity, as demonstrated in the debate between Howie Kalman, Stephen Cohen, and Theodore Zassin, Charles Kadishin in Leonard Six. With this historical backdrop, it made complete sense that October 7th and subsequent military action by the Israeli Defense Force would divide the Jewish community. However, I argue that this division and vacating of Hillel has more to do with representation than overt political motivation. Jewish life on college campuses post-October 7th have been characterized by fear of rising anti-Semitism, especially as pro-Palestine encampments emerge internationally. University administration in Denver was very attentive to student and parent fears of rising anti-Semitism, but did not recognize any tension of the Jewish community, which ultimately outweighed any reports of anti-Semitic activities on campus during this time. The University of Denver chancellor held regular meetings with the director of Hillel, Colorado, over concerns about the Palestine encampment, but refused to meet with the Jewish students inside the encampment. An estimated one-third of encampment members were Jewish, leaving them excluded from the university statements about concerns for Jewish safety. By doing this, the university made the decision that Jews supporting Israel had the authority to represent all Jews, and Jews critical of the state's military actions were not. This is a sentiment which has also been reinforced by Donald Trump, Hillel's policy that anti-Zionist Jews cannot hold officer positions, and the ADL's criticism of both the Jewish Voice for Peace and J Street as anti-Semitic and not fully Jewish organizations. This is where I want to reground my study in a uniquely American socio-political context, because this negotiation of identity is not contained to the Jewish community, but influenced by all American politics. One respondent stated that a significant event in their identity formation was the ADL's public defense of Elon Musk's Nazi salute. The University of Denver chapter of students supporting Israel was also noted to have shared pro-Trump content, including one post which stated that Donald Trump's rally at the Madison Square Park in 2024, the same event where comedian Tony Hinchcliffe referred to Puerto Rico as, quote, a floating island of garbage, was the most pro-Israel and pro-Jewish place in politics, and therefore it is anti-Semitic to claim that the event was racist. While the majority of Jewish students identified as politically progressive, major organizations are turning towards conservative leadership for support for Israel. For students with multiple marginalized identities, especially LGBTQ students, the shift in allegiance is concerning. It is also unnecessary. As Doug Waxman points out, both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party have shown strong support for Israel's right to defend itself. According to data pulled by J Street, the majority of American Jews voted for Kamala Harris in the 2024 presidential elections, despite the claims made by Donald Trump. What this says to me is that mainstream Jewish organizations are no longer representative of American Jewish youth. That being said, it is not just political beliefs which drove students to form their own organizations and abandon Hillel, but the refusal for the campus Hillel and Chabad to hold space for Jewish diversity, despite proclaiming their acceptance for all Jews. Following the encampment, the Denver Hillel prioritized solidarity with Israel, with many of their student leaders driving out those who had been in or showed sympathy for the encampment. Similarly, the Chabad rabbi on campus actively encouraged students to antagonize and oppose members of the encampment to show their Jewish pride. The former student president of the Denver Hillel, who actively opposed the encampment, stated in an interview that she resigned because, quote, Hillel is no longer a safe and welcoming space for all Jews. The refusal for organizations to hold open meetings where students can talk about and debate their opinions on identity, Israel, Palestine, and Jewish history is what led students to fear each other. Rather than promoting dialogue, the school Jewish leadership supported the narrative that the encampments and supporters of Palestine were dangerous, meaning that their fellow Jews were also a danger to them. They could no longer trust their friends or their neighbors because they did not know who was secretly supporting the enemy state. A number of Jewish students who participated in the encampment went on to join the Denver chapter of Jewish Voice for Peace, while even more formed their own chapter of Judaism on our own terms. JUT is a network of college groups which characterize themselves as an anti-Zionist alternative to Hillel. The groups center the histories and traditions of Sephardi, Mizrahi, and other Jews of color, and encourage open and honest dialogue about Palestine. The creation of this organization brings me to my next action point: racism. Now, you'll notice from my chart that racism is not an extremely large factor for belonging. That is because the University of Denver is a PWI, which if you don't know what that is, predominantly white institution. And the majority of Jews in the United States are Ashkenazi or Jews with Eastern European backgrounds. That being said, I decided to include racism because in many ways it overlaps with political tensions throughout Israel-Palestine, and I think answers some larger, deep-seated tensions that we have going on. Less than 1/4 of all participants self-identified as non-white, while slightly more than half stated that their Jewish identity separated them from what they viewed as full American whiteness. One student went as far as to state that while his skin is white, he was viewed as other because his hair and eyes were brown, while in Israel most people look like him. This is a very different experience from students of color who stated that within Jewish faces their authenticity as a Jew is questioned on account of their appearance. Most are assumed to be converts or to be adopted into a Jewish family. While Judaism teaches that converts and adoptees are to be respected and treated no different than ethnic Jews, this is clearly not always the case. The assumption that people of color are automatically converts or adoptees also points to white lighter skin tones being understood as part of the Jewish identity, which notably contradicts Augustine's statements that they as Jews are not white on account of their Jewishness. To connect this back to October 7th, 3 Jewish students with Arab backgrounds detailed hostility towards them due to their Arab names. One student from Syria stated that student within Chabad told him that he should not exist because, quote, there are no Jews in Arab countries, and that he must be lying. This statement refers to the expulsion of Jews from Arab and other Muslim countries due to violent anti-Semitism, leading many to relocate to Israel as a place of refuge. The prevalence of Ashkenazi Jews in the United States means that most Jewish students are oversaturated with Ashkenazi history and culture. Aside from the Jews of color themselves who have Sephardi and Mizrahi background, no participants acknowledge the existence of other Jewish groups. This indicates a deeper tension within Jewish spaces being brought to the fore, and while October 7th may have been the catalyst, the foundation for fracture started long ago. Neither October 7th nor the encampment causing divisions to be sown amongst a never stable and united Jewish community. Rather, it brought to the surface tensions and fractures which had been long concealed for the purpose of community. The sentiment, however, is echoed in the social media battle cry that if one Jew is cut, all Jews bleed, but when one Jew is saved, all will dance. This statement has been a common implication for Jewish national allegiance to the Israeli cause. However, the division among Jews at the University of Denver turns the sentiment on its head, proving that there are many Jews from whom those with representative Jewish authority, Hillel, Chabad, the ADL, etc., will not support if they are attacked and marginalized. People believe that October 7th would unite Jews under one Jewish identity, but neglected to consider that, as Audrey Lloyd so eloquently stated, we do not live single-issue lives. Jews have been the focal point of public discussion in American international politics since October 7th, but each student I interviewed told me I was the first person to ask them about their personal experience as a Jew. My biggest takeaway was that Jews sit in a social gray space when it comes to privilege and power in America. This is why race as a concept is so important for them. Race is foundational to understanding power structures in the United States. American Ashkenazi Jews largely come from families that immigrated from Europe. Eventually, through assimilation, Jews in America attained whiteness, and due to a parent will always have an easier time attaining white privilege than Americans of color, especially Black Americans. However, that does not mean the United States is built for Jews or less anti-Semitism. From Jewish space lasers, Kanye West, and annual Hanukkah massacres, America is not the Jewish paradise which freedom of religion makes it out to be. This marginalization is often ignored in activist spaces despite the majority of American Jews being politically progressive. This is what has led students to follow accounts like Jewish on Campus and Stand With Us. Both accounts, students say, provide updates on Jewish life, which other activist accounts were not doing. Even students who join the encampment, as well as Jewish Voice for Peace, so that while they do not regret it, it's extremely hard to be in those spaces because the Jewish identity is often overlooked, ignored, or they are treated as an oppressor despite their long-term allyship. The narrative in activist spaces has largely been that Israel is a white colonial state, and by extension, Jews are white colonizers. This narrative has signaled a shift in identity to white passing rather than fully white by Jewish students, because while we do have more white privilege than most people of color, the erasure of our history and experiences separates us from full whiteness. That being said, we cannot forget that this view of Jews and race does not account for Jews of color and Jews from non-Ashkenazi backgrounds who are also left out of Jewish campus spaces because both we as Jews as well as Gentiles view Ashkenazim as the norm for Judaism. This adds to tension in Jewish spaces because for those who are aware, this makes Jews both victims and perpetrators, something which both historian Jonathan Schlarna and journalist Peter Beinart highlight in their writings on Jewish history. What I want to leave you all with today is that the Jewish community is divided now more than ever. While the University of Denver is one campus and definitely not reflective of the entire nation, a good portion of these debates on identity are playing out in online spaces which transcend one location. However, that division comes from the organizations meant to represent us and no longer representing the interests, opinions, identities of American Jewish youth, not from bad actors and not from self-hatred. Every student I talked to loved the Jewish identity, but did not represented by the mainstream discussion being had with the United States government and the ADL, nor with the Israeli government. Freedom of speech and democracy are valued so highly both in the United States and amongst the Jewish community, but college campuses and Jewish organizations promote unquestioning support for a state, rather than allowing students to learn about and wrestle with the nuanced complexities of Jewishness. The Jewish tradition is built on disagreement, on argument, and on grappling with great unknowns so that we can gain mutual understanding of each other and the world around us. To exchange the traditional debate for communal and political homogeneity is to make the Jewish community complicit, to grow in authoritarian values both in the U.S. and abroad. And the Jewish students of the University of Denver decided that if that is what mainstream Judaism meant, they would not want to be part of it.